Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something really important: compassionate communities. It's this growing global movement, and honestly, it's completely changing how we think about care, dying, and grief. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into what this new approach to care is all about. Then, we're going to bust three really common myths. After that, we'll look at a great example of this in action, and we'll finish up with the big idea you need to remember. All right, first up, a new approach to care. And the first thing you really have to get your head around is that this is a huge shift in thinking. We're talking about moving away from seeing death and dying as just a medical problem that happens behind hospital doors and seeing it for what it is: a shared social responsibility. And this quote really nails it. It's about transforming palliative care from just another healthcare service into a form of civic engagement. What does that actually mean? Well, it means we're mobilizing entire communities, our neighbors, our workplaces, local clubs, to all share in supporting people who are facing death and grief. So no, this is not just another hospital program. It's way bigger than that. And look, this isn't just some nice, fuzzy idea. The evidence is starting to roll in, and it shows real, measurable benefits. I mean, we're talking about decreasing unnecessary trips to the hospital, which leads to some pretty significant cost savings. But even more important, it actually improves people's quality of life and boosts that feeling of social connection right when they need it the most. Okay, so that brings us to our first big myth, and honestly, this is a major roadblock. It's this idea that compassionate communities are just another healthcare program, run from the top down. And this right here really shows you the difference. On one side, you've got the myth: healthcare leads. What happens then? Well, it can actually foster dependency. The community kind of becomes a passive audience, just waiting for instructions. But look at the reality. When it's a true partnership, the community gets empowered. It builds its own capacity, and you get a real, genuine sense of shared responsibility. And really, this is the bottom line. If a community keeps thinking that end-of-life care is only a job for doctors and nurses, well, the whole model just falls apart. That fundamental shift just doesn't happen. The core idea that death is a shared human experience, it gets totally lost. All right, so that's myth number one. But that leads to another question, right? If it's not a healthcare program, is it trying to replace formal services like professional palliative care? This is a huge fear for some people, but nope, couldn't be further from the truth.
The goal is connection, not replacement. You can almost think of a compassionate community as like a weaver. It's not trying to invent new threads out of thin air. Instead, it finds all these support systems that are already out there, but are kind of fragmented and scattered, and it weaves them together into one strong, supportive safety net. And look at all the different threads in that network. We're talking about families, neighbors, those faith groups down the street, volunteers, all the community programs that are already running. The magic happens when you connect all of that to the formal health and social services. It takes all these individual, scattered acts of kindness and turns them into something bigger, a coordinated effort so that people don't feel like they're going through this all alone. Okay, 2 myths down, 1 to go. What about this third one? Is it enough to just talk about death more? Just raise awareness. Is that enough to really make a difference? Don't get me wrong. Things like death cafes and grief festivals, they're a great start. They're awesome for breaking down taboos. But, and this is a big but, all the research in health promotion tells us the same thing. Just knowing something isn't enough to change how we act in the long run. Awareness is really just the starting line. So to get to real, lasting change, a community needs to build up what some experts call compassion capital. It's a great term. It's not just about what we know, it's about our collective capacity, our ability as a group to see when someone's suffering and, this is the crucial part, to actually respond in a helpful way. So how do you build that capital? Well, it's not abstract. It comes from concrete actions. Things like teaching people practical skills so they feel confident helping, building real, two-way relationships, giving people chances to have positive experiences with caregiving, and, super important, pushing for those bigger system-wide changes that make all this other stuff possible. Okay, so what does that advocacy part actually look like in the real world? Let's check out a fantastic case study from an organization in Australia. So check this out. They got over 150 people in a room. People from government, from healthcare, from community groups all over. And the whole point wasn't just to have another meeting and talk. No,
The goal was to actually create tangible calls to action, which they called advocacy statements, to drive real change. And what's so smart about this is that they didn't just create one generic plan. They knew that care happens in a lot of different places. So they got really specific and developed targeted strategies for 7 key settings, from hospitals and hospices to workplaces and local government. It's super strategic.
And this is where it gets really powerful. Let's just take one example: residential aged care. They lay it all out. What's the problem? Isolation, fragmented care. What's the goal, the aspiration? To create homes where people feel cared about, not just cared for. And then, boom, here are the specific calls to action. Center resident voices, build deaf literacy, map community resources. It's an actual practical roadmap for how to make things better.
Okay, so we've demystified the whole idea, we've busted some myths, we've looked at a real-world example. So what's the big takeaway here? What's the one thing you should remember? It really comes down to this. Building these kinds of communities isn't just a nice-to-have idea anymore. With our populations getting older and the demand for care just skyrocketing, it's become both a moral imperative and a really practical necessity. We kind of have to do this. And that really leaves us with a question for you to think about. Because this isn't about waiting for someone else to solve the problem. The real question is, how can your community, I'm talking your workplace, your neighborhood, your town, how can you start to be part of transforming the way we all care for one another?